I would answer the question first by noting that it's hard to imagine relations being any worse than they are currently. I mean, from my vantage point at least, they are characterized by a total absence of trust, a total lack of respect, no empathy, which I regard as a recipe for disaster should we experience today one of the many close calls we had in the past in which nuclear weapons might have been used either due to accidents, miscalculations, and misperceptions. And just to give you an example of this, in 1995, there was a sounding rocket, a scientific rocket that was launched off the coast of Norway, which initially was perceived by Russian command and control as a U.S. submarine-launched ballistic missile. And fortunately, this was only a single missile that was launched. Russian command and control quite quickly were able to determine that indeed it was not a ballistic missile that was headed toward them, launched from an American submarine. But they had reason to be mistaken because of the multi-stage nature of the rocket. And there was also at least, this may be apocryphal, but at least some have said that Mr. Yeltsin said, my good friend Bill will never do this to me. In any case, this was 1995. I worry that if a similar incident were to occur today, in the absence of any trust, that the outcome might have been very, very different. So that's the first point I would make. I personally would be hopeful that in a Biden administration, that it will be possible for the United States and the Russian Federation to do much more in promoting nuclear risk reduction. But at a minimum, at a bare minimum, I think it's absolutely essential for the United States and Russia to reiterate their support for the Reagan-Gorbachev principle that a nuclear war cannot be won and must never be fought. There are a number of other things that one could hope for, and I am optimistic that efforts will be made, including the U.S. return to the JCPOA, notwithstanding all kinds of domestic political obstacles in both countries, to make that actually viable. I think it may be possible for the United States actually to engage with Russia in some realms, including in the realm of combating nuclear terrorism, perhaps in export controls. I could imagine a partnership of some sort regarding trying to get more stringent safeguards in place for the Saudi program, which is rather ambitious, but could be of a dual nature that we have to be concerned about. There was talk in the current administration about possibly reviving nuclear testing. I'm quite certain that in a Biden administration, that would be totally off the table, and you'll see renewed support for the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty, although the composition of the Senate makes it unlikely that that treaty could be ratified, but at least there'll be no more talk about nuclear testing. And finally, I would say that I would hope that we might be able to return to a more cooperative spirit and actual collaboration in the NPT review process. I think that if we succeed in extending New START, and I can't imagine that we would not be able to get a 5-year extension, that action will be positively regarded by other states parties to the Non-Proliferation Treaty, and that will create an atmosphere which I think will be conducive perhaps to other areas of where we can find common ground. So why don't I stop there? I think, a lot depends on the individuals that President Biden appoints to key positions in the U.S. government. We don't know, we know many of the contenders, but we don't really know how these slots are going to be filled. And I think that will be important because the president himself almost certainly is going to be focused on domestic issues, the COVID pandemic first and foremost, the economy, but there are a host of other issues that will garner the bulk of his attention. So other individuals will be quite instrumental here. My hope is that the U.S. Will not deploy new short and intermediate range missiles abroad. But how the U.S. proceeds certainly will also depend on Russian behavior and the overall state of U.S.-Russian relations. And in that regard, I would say that I think that I personally, and I suspect that quite a few others, welcome Mr. Putin's proposal regarding reciprocal site visits, including Kaliningrad. I don't think that's the end of the story, but I think it's at least a positive recent initiative. I think that President Biden plans to immediately seek to extend the treaty by 5 years without conditions. I suspect that's what will transpire. And I think that the U.S. also will be open to further negotiations on a follow-on accord. But I'm not terribly optimistic that we're going to make much progress in that respect, not only given differences in U.S. and Russian positions and priorities, but also because of the composition of the U.S. Senate, which will make it very, very difficult for the new Senate to ratify, anything, including something as sensitive as a new arms control accord. But I think the U.S. will be certainly open to further negotiations. I don't see the issue of arms and space as a non-proliferation issue, but I think it is going to be a subject of increased importance in bilateral arms control negotiations and also in negotiations in various multilateral fora. I think it may be possible to make some headway in this domain. I think we should have discussions in this regard, but I doubt if it's going to be a high priority for the U.S., at least initially. Well, in my view, the JCPOA certainly wasn't a perfect accord, but I can't imagine that a better deal could be negotiated at this time. I would hope, I can't say I'm optimistic, that it will be possible to revive the accord with the U.S. return to the agreement. I think that's what the administration would like to do. But it's the case that there are significant difficulties of a domestic political nature in both the United States and Iran. In fact, I would suggest that it's probably even more difficult for the liberals in Iran than for those in the U.S., in particular because of the presidential election that is scheduled for the first half of 2021 in Iran. It's easy for any U.S. president to say that he or she will not allow Iran to advance its nuclear program, but it's not clear how the U.S., short of potentially disastrous military action, will be able to accomplish that objective. So I think, we are likely to see some efforts to return to the JCPOA. I hope they're successful, but it's not going to be a simple process. Now, I'm hopeful. I'm not optimistic, but I'm hopeful that a return by the United States to the JCPOA, may help to stabilize the situation in the Middle East. I think at least the U.S. is much less likely to act rashly in a military fashion against Iran. How the Israelis and the Iranians proceed, however, is hard to predict, and my crystal ball isn't very clear at the moment in that regard. So the DPRK, to use an American expression, is a very tough nut to crack, something like krepkий oрешек. I don't think that the U.S. has any particularly novel approaches that they can pursue. We've tried many, and we haven't gotten very far. I think this is one area where there is the potential for joint action involving the United States, Russia, and also China, for that matter. But it will be very difficult to make progress, and a lot will depend also on the stance taken by the DPRK.